Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, friends, to the AP Strange Show. We got a good show for you tonight. Happy New Year's. This is our New Year's show, and it is brought to you by the Talkie Tina doll. It's the big hit right now with all the kids. Perfect gift for any young girl with plenty of pre-programmed phrases like "You're my best friend" and "I'm Talkie Tina and I don't like you very much." Good stuff, good clean fun for girls of all ages, or boys for all ages. We don't have to be gender specific with this doll, and in fact, it's great for the elimination of verbally abusive stepdads as well. So if you're looking for an after Christmas gift, if you got a gift receipt that you want to turn something back in and exchange it, think about the Talkie Tina doll. It's a good bargain for your money. And tonight, being that it is a New Year's program here, one of my favorite things on New Year's as a kid was watching the Three Stooges marathon. But eventually, there came conflict with the Twilight Zone marathon. At some point, I think the Sci-Fi Channel and then sometimes other channels would run Twilight Zone over and over again. And I was then in a quandary and had to go back and forth, figure out if I wanted to watch Stooges or Zone. And I always, I ended up watching plenty of Twilight Zone and in rerun syndication. I've owned different collections at different times. It's long been a favorite show of mine. And so I wanted to do a New Year's show. And in thinking about it, I got a good guest. I had the perfect guest in mind already because we had talked about it briefly once before. So submitted for your approval. She is an artist. She's a writer. She's a podcaster. She is on with her own show and website, 6 Degrees of John Keel, which has been on hiatus for a little bit because she's writing a book. But don't worry, you will hear more of her, and you're going to hear plenty of her tonight. Welcome to the show, Barbara Fisher.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. It's good to talk to you again.
It's good to talk with you. And Talkie Tina, man. Everybody should have one, I think. Because if your stepdad sucks, well, she has the cure for that.
Right. It's a doll that'll never leave your side, no matter how hard you try.
Yeah. Yep. Monster Garage cannot keep that doll down. There's no tools, no fire, nothing keeps her down. She just bounces right back.
Yeah. I mean, that was an episode we didn't really have on our list, but that seemed like the best sponsor spot tonight, because that one, it's like that one's been parodied before. That's one of those episodes that is huge, but every time I watch it, man, it slays me. Like Telly Savalas is so good in that. It's such a powerful performance. Yeah,
it is.
So
it's one of those episodes that by all rights should be stupid.
Right.
It should be just, oh my God, it's a living doll. Right. But you got to remember when this was made, that wasn't a trope that everybody saw every day. That wasn't a thing that started the trope. Right. So it wasn't a thing that it wasn't tiresome. Mm-hmm. And what's really interesting is the doll was actually based on a real doll that had just come out at that time. Her name was Chatty Cathy. I collect dolls, by the way. I know it's hard to believe looking at me. I don't look like a doll collecting lady. But I do like dolls, and I do collect them. And part of the reason I collect them is because they're creepy.
Yeah.
So a lot of my dolls have a little creepy edge to it. So anyway, Chatty Cathy was big when this came out. It came out in what, season 3, or was it season 1?
I think
No.
it was the first season.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. I tried to write down all of those facts and figures for people, but you
Right.
can just look up Living Doll Twilight Zone and you'll get there.
Right.
Um anyway, that doll was really popular, and they used the woman, the voice actress who voiced the Chatty Cathy doll.
It was
So
June
when you're
Foray.
watching, so when you're watching the show, Talkie Tina has the same voice as your kid's Chatty Cathy doll.
Wow.
Yeah, that's creepy. And interestingly, it's June Foray, and
Yeah.
she did Rocky on the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. So she has that kind of voice that's just a little bit, it's
Right.
kind of got that
Legendary voice
timbre.
actress.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she's great. And yeah, so I love that. Oh, and the stepmom, or not the stepmom, the mom's name in it is Annabelle, which
Right.
I did not think about until I watched it like a week ago and went, oh.
Yeah. That's a weird kind of synchronicity there. But yeah, no, June Foray is one of those all-time classic voice actresses. She did Witch Hazel in the Bugs Bunny cartoons too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah.
The green
So,
witch with her heel clicking and her hairpins flying out behind her. I love that.
yeah. Yep.
That's a role model for me, man.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. The premise of it is absurd, really. I mean, but what's great about it is you don't see the doll move. Um, and Telly Savalas's character is the only one that hears it saying like mean things to him,
Yeah.
or not even really mean, just like judging him harshly for being verbally abusive. And they were so good at scripting it and acting it out in a way that you got the full scope of what was going on through kind of overacting. It was like a melodrama. Like you
Oh
got a
yeah.
limited amount of time, so you had to get that all in there. And the actors really had to be on. They really had to be on to make that work. And Savalas definitely is. You get the full range of his insecurities, and which makes him an asshole.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, he's great in it. Like
yeah,
seriously amazing.
right,
I again, I hadn't seen it in years, although that one scared me as a kid.
right,
I collect dolls, but I don't like them, saying unsanctioned things.
right.
That's a little nerve-wracking. Uh, but man, I was so impressed with how he did it. And you could watch it and you could go, hey, maybe he's having a schizophrenic episode. Maybe,
Right.
I mean, he's a little old for it to be his first one, but maybe he's cruised through the first couple of them and then it died back, and then
Right.
something about that doll just got him. And
Hmm.
man, but yeah, he tries to destroy her in all these different ways. And she's like the cat that came back the very next day. She keeps coming back, but you don't see her, walking along. She's
Right.
not like Chucky,
She just ends up there. Yeah.
Yeah, she just ends up in places where she shouldn't be. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And I mean that's the other half. Because the two kinds of episodes that I was really interested in talking about tonight were ones that could have a connection to or are analogous to high strangeness cases and Fortiana that we love so much, and also the social messages in them, which are timeless and
Oh yeah.
unfortunately very relevant today.
Yeah.
Um, but but yeah, I mean, I think at its best, the show was always people focus a lot on the twist endings, but really what it is that whole program, the whole time, you're left with a lot of options, and even after the episode's over, you can choose to believe any number of things actually happen, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a perfectly done show in
Oh
that
yeah.
respect.
Yeah. I mean, the living doll episode in a lot of ways reminds me of a Ray Bradbury story called The Tiny Assassin.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But that was a baby. That was an infant
Right.
that was,
Yeah.
trying to kill its parent.
That story is so twisted.
I I love that story though, man. And you can tell I grew up with Edgar Allan Poe and Ray Bradbury and watching the Twilight Zone and all this stuff because, yeah, I just love this stuff. But man, just the idea of it being at least an infant can move, like it's
Right.
supposed to, although they're not supposed to be quite that coordinated. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
And that story, as a mom, I read it as a really interesting take and an early take on the idea of postpartum psychosis.
Right. Right.
Because there's postpartum depression, which is bad enough.
Right.
I mean, that's when you just feel like everything's awful and terrible. But some people can go into a psychosis with that. And so that's what that story is kind of about. But it's Ray Bradbury, so he takes that and runs with it to the 100-yard line. He just goes, and really pushes the envelope. So I appreciate that. And when I watched the end of The Living Doll, that's what I thought of, because I had forgotten exactly how the Living Doll story went. I just knew, oh, she doesn't like him. Now something bad's going to happen. And I didn't remember what the bad thing was. So as soon as that happened, I was like, oh, Ray. This is like Ray, but for a stad,
Well, Bradbury was friends with all those guys, like Richard Matheson and Charles Beaumont, and Jerry Storr. Like these were all sci-fi writers that hung out together.
Yeah.
I think they were called like the West Coast Sorcerers or something, the Sorcerers Club.
Yeah.
There was some kind of nickname for these guys. And it's kind of sad that Bradbury's only got one episode. They did one episode that was based on a Bradbury story. I Sing the Body Electric.
And
but imagine, it's good. But imagine
it is good.
Imagine if they did the Illustrated Man as a Twilight Zone episode. That would be
so wonderful. So wonderful. They could have done the Tiny Assassin too. That would have been, the one thing I wanted to jump in with though, the way that it's shot.
Yeah.
I mean, people are not used to this style of short form TV shows anymore with these kinds of very cinematic shots. It's really, really interesting to look at. And, I grew up with black and white TV. Yes, I'm that old. But, and we were poor too, so we didn't get color for a little bit. But I was used to where, they, with black and white television, you had to do things for contrast so that everything didn't turn into this gray mush. And everybody's like, which character is that? I can't see, So you always had that interplay with shadows and light. But the directors on the Twilight Zone really latched onto that and pushed it as far as they could. They really, each one's like a little movie to me.
Yeah.
It really, I mean, it's just beautifully done.
Yeah, it's high quality.
Yeah.
All the way around, yeah.
Yeah. So, anybody who's like, I don't like old things. Well, you do. You just don't know you do yet. You haven't seen it and you haven't looked at it. So you should.
I think one aspect of that is like a little bit of German expressionism influence in there. Because I think it was Karl Freund was a cinematographer and director from like Universal Movies, and he was working for Desilu Productions in the early days and kind of helped develop how early TV was shot, different camera settings and everything. And you do see that in some of the episodes. Like one of the ones I picked because it's an all-time favorite of mine is Perchance to Dream.
Oh,
This one is so wild, and
Yeah,
I think it's the 9th episode of the show. So
it
figure
is. I
that's
just watched it today.
right. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, this one has carnival scenes that are just straight out of a nightmare. I mean, it basically,
Mhm.
it's just the shifted camera angles so that it's at about a 45-degree tilt sometimes,
Mhm.
fog rolling in, and I mean, it looks like the same stuff you'd see in like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or something like that,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
a way, the way it's shot. And
Yeah.
but obviously it's a different quality of film and everything, but um but yeah, I mean, the angles, the way they frame things is
Mhm.
just a little bit off kilter. And you see that a lot in the 60s, but I think the Twilight Zone was kind of doing it before anybody else, you know.
I feel like you're right. I feel like
Yeah.
that's yeah, I think that's 100% right. Yeah, there are parts of, all of these episodes that I watched that, I love the silent film by Murnau, Nosferatu, which, okay,
Yeah.
obviously I can't wait to see the new one that's coming out. But anyway, I'm not going to get off on that.
Right.
But I love that film because of the German expressionist uh, aesthetic,
Mhm.
that high contrast use of shadow to distort reality or present supernatural reality. So they use shadows, they use reflections, they use light, and there's just, the camera is often low and then shooting upwards, and that gives, an a sort of an imposing view of a character, or it's shot from above and then down to make the character look smaller.
Yeah.
And so the Twilight Zone just grabs all of that and uses it, and really it really does. It's such good storytelling. It's so artful, and it's
Mhm.
so impactful. So yeah, I could totally geek out. But talk a
Yeah.
little more about Perchance to Dream, because that I had forgotten all of that plot until I watched it
Yeah.
today.
I mean, that is one that I'm always coming back to, and it's just basically a man goes to a psychiatrist, and he doesn't want to see the psychiatrist, but his doctor basically recommended it, and he's going there just to make his doctor happy. But it's a man that will not go to sleep. He refuses to go to sleep because if he does, the woman that's in his dreams is going to kill him. It's this lady, Maya, the cat lady, that is a kind of a burlesque dancer at the carnival in his dream. And she's terrorizing him. He has a heart condition, and he's just gonna. He knows if he goes back into the dream, if he falls asleep, he's gonna go right back into that dream, be stuck on a roller coaster next to her, and she's gonna shock him to death.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a wild ride. I mean, it's so intense. The guy that stars in it, had his name last night, but he's really just chewing the scenery the whole time because it's like a monologue on his part.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. um, just an awesome story. And like I said, the carnival scenery, Maya the cat lady, all of that, um, uh, just amounts. And of course, you get the twist ending. I don't know if we're revealing twist endings on this yet. We didn't
I have
discuss that. Should we just talk to say what
I
happens
mean,
at
it's
the end, or make people watch them?
I feel like we should try to get them to watch them, but I don't know. I'll follow
Yeah.
your lead. If you start giving off secrets, I'll jump in with it.
All
But
right. Well, that one I'm not gonna. But I mean,
yeah, because
yeah.
it's
But I mean, it's something that you see come back. It's the interplay of reality and the astral, or like what is reality. It plays with a lot of those ideas. It's not dissimilar to, like, ahead of its time, I guess, because it's not too dissimilar to like the Freddy Krueger idea.
oh yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, she doesn't have, like, knifey claws, but she's still pretty scary.
Yeah.
I really liked the actress. I didn't catch her name because I was just watching it and then was just gobsmacked at the end and went, oh, look, oh, I got to
Yeah,
go fix dinner, so I can't so I'll write it down later. Did I? No, I didn't. But they did a really great job with portraying her as clearly dangerous, and yet, you just look at her, she's like, oh, she's just a showgirl, dude.
yeah,
Why are you so? And then they'd show her eye makeup, and then I was like, oh, yeah, she's kind of creepy. Or you see a reflection of like a quarter of her face, the upper quarter, and you see the eye. It's the first time you
yeah.
see her. You just see her
Right.
eye, and I was like, yeah,
It seemed
that's
like it seemed like her makeup was asymmetrical too. Like she had
yeah.
the yeah, so it was kind of really off-putting.
It was. I mean, she was beautiful, and her outfits, are the very late 50s, early 60s, super tight, slinky, Catwoman like
Yeah,
vibe. But there was also just, it was off putting. Like you said, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know.
right.
It,
Back in the days when they had a little like strip tease tent at the carnival, I guess.
yeah, something for the dads to go to. I don't know.
um, but yeah, it does make me wonder, like rewatching it because I watched it again last night just to make sure it was fresh in my memory. But uh, you almost wonder if she was being malicious and trying to kill him, or if I wondered this all the time about supernatural entities because a lot of times their people's lives are changed almost for the better after having an encounter with something that initially terrified them. So
Yeah.
it's almost like was she actually trying to um, cause some kind of shift in this guy's perspective to make him less anxious and settle down, or was she trying to kill him? It's hard to know.
And that's where you have to weigh that, oh, she's beautiful, but she's a little creepy too. Oh, and her laugh, that crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah, that actress has a really good crazy laugh. Um,
yeah,
and she deploys it with great aplomb and to great effect. It actually made my dog, sit up and, look around at, who's laughing, because we have really good speakers on the TV. So
oh,
yeah,
that's funny.
yeah,
My dog reacted to it too, and I was like, "Oh, it's kind of
oh.
because he hates cats." So I thought it was kind of funny. He's like, "Oh, he hates the cat lady,"
Dogs know, man. They know when somebody's not on the up and up. But
Yeah,
what you say is, maybe she was just trying to get him to chill out, because she kept telling him, hey, this is fun. This is fun. You don't need to worry. It's fun.
right.
We're having fun. And it was like, well, maybe you're
Yeah,
having fun, lady.
and
But
it was like lucid dreaming because he knew it was a dream, and she
yeah,
was saying, "You said yourself, it's just a dream. You can't be hurt here. Let's just go on a ride."
yeah,
So,
yeah. Let's get on the roller coaster. Let's go into the haunted house. Let's do this. And yeah, and the whole time he's, dragging his feet, but he's still attracted to her, so he kind of goes along,
yeah,
and it doesn't end well for him, but you hope for him,
right.
and what I was thinking when you said, well, so many people after a supernatural experience, uh they end up, even though it was scary to start out with, they end up with positive changes if they can get past that fear.
Hmm.
um and it also makes sense, because if the non-human intelligence that's messing with someone uh is feeding from their emotions,
Yeah,
which that could have been with her. Well, you don't want to kill dinner, you know, unless there's nothing else to be had from dinner.
right, right.
And then you have to go on to the next one. But in some cases, with her, if she was feeding off of his intense anxiety and yet attraction to her, well, she wouldn't really want to kill him, would she?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, who knows? It's
Yeah, exactly. It's the
it's so
non-human
so
intelligence with it.
right. Yeah, it's so wild. Um, uh, and like I have to mention the title too. That was part of the artful nature of these. They had like Shakespeare-driven titles for things. "Perchance to Dream" is from Hamlet's soliloquy.
Mhm.
Uh, and so it's really good stuff. "What dreams may come." That made me think that Richard Matheson wrote that one because he wrote the book What Dreams May Come later.
It's true. It's
Um,
true.
but that was actually Charles Beaumont. So those were like Rod Serling's two main guys, Beaumont and Matheson, and they were
Yeah.
both super heavyweights. Um, but I didn't know that much about Beaumont until earlier today, and I was looking him up. Man, that guy had a real short life, and it was pretty
Yeah.
tragic. Like, geez, he
Yeah.
only lived to be like 37,
Yeah.
and he just had some weird debilitating disorder where he couldn't think or act anymore, and couldn't get his thoughts together or get himself together, and just to the point where some of the episodes were actually written by Jerry Storr but credited to Beaumont. So that way he could still get some income. Uh, he did it kind of as a solid for his friend. But yeah, that's crazy and kind of sad too.
That's extremely sad. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that sounds like a Twilight Zone episode too.
right. I guess
Life
there's like a.
and art and yeah.
I think I read that there was either a book or a documentary that was supposed to have come out this year about him. In particular, his work with the Twilight Zone. So I'd be interested in checking that out because I always had Richard Matheson on the mind with it because he wrote a lot of the wraparound stuff. Um, he expanded the whole intro during the opening credits. He often would write the little monologues that Rod Serling would do before and after.
Yeah.
So yeah, Matheson was,
Matheson has a really good way with words.
yeah, he's one of my all-time favorites. I love his
Yeah.
short stories too. But I mean, in addition, he wrote like the Shrinking Man, which became the movie The Incredible Shrinking Man. I Am Legend.
Yeah.
Uh, that's which became The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, and then The Omega Man with Steve McQueen, and then later I Am Legend with Will Smith.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's been made into films like over and over and over.
yeah,
Light changes each time.
right. So I mean, I just to be a fly on the wall, hanging out with like Matheson and Beaumont and Bradbury and Serling. Like, imagine that. That's
That
crazy.
would be amazing. So cool. Like so cool. Um
Yeah,
and Serling wrote so many episodes that are absolute classics too.
yeah, he did.
Um,
Yeah,
and when I was young, when I was watching it on reruns, when I was really really young, I didn't give a hoot about him because he's always scaring me to death. Just the his voice would scare me after a while, and so I'd hide behind the couch. But as I got to be a teenager, he was just so incredibly cool. Like,
yeah.
although
He has a
in my head, Indrid Cold looks like him in my head.
yeah. He almost has like an MIB kind of quality too.
Yep.
He's like a phantom, and it's like he's this weird archetype where I loved when they would do like the really fast spin camera thing
Oh
where
yeah.
it would just spin over and he's just standing there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's often in the scene. It's not like they went
Yeah.
back to a studio or he's got just like a space thing behind him. He's just sitting at the table in the diner casually, or just like standing on the street corner,
Yeah.
stepping out from behind
Or
something. Yeah,
or the main character just walked past him, but he was so far in the background that he was,
right.
not in focus, and then the camera comes back and there he is.
Yeah,
And yeah,
he's
so in my head, when I first read about Indrid Cold and the Mothman prophecies, it was him. It was Rod Serling.
wow, that's crazy. Yeah,
And his smile is somewhat creepy too. So in my head, even to this day, that's who Indrid Cold looks like.
well, I feel like his teeth were always showing whether he was smiling or not. Like you'd see,
Yeah.
it was like almost like he was talking through his teeth a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I guess he
Yeah.
was a boxer at one point. Um,
I didn't know that.
I was reading that about him. I think either right before or after the army, he was boxing quite a bit, and he got like broken nose and stuff. So that might have informed his jawline. But
Yeah, that might have also been why when he spoke, it always looked like his upper lip didn't move, and that may actually be part of
yeah,
why.
could have had nerve damage or something from getting
Yeah.
hit in the face too many times. Yeah. because they weren't exactly safe about boxing back in those days.
No. They're
Yeah.
not greatly safe about it now. I mean, you're getting hit in the head.
There's no way around it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a very safe way to, make a living.
Right.
But it's, but I could see
Yeah.
it. I could see
Yeah.
it. And he always had a
But
cigarette.
yeah,
That's another
always the
thing.
cigarette. Yeah.
That's
He definitely
another
made
thing.
smoking cool,
Oh yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, I know, right? Do I look like Rod Serling? No, you don't, ma'am. You look like a woman with a cigarette. Stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
But I can't think of too many other people that are like that, where they're kind of just always on the periphery and they just come out of the shadows. Like for me growing up, it was him and Robert Stack when I watched Unsolved Mysteries because he'd come walking out of the fog to tell you some terrifying bullshit.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Somebody disappeared and 15
but
kids were killed and
yeah,
buried in a bus in the desert. And yeah,
yeah.
all of
Or
these awful things.
yeah. The other one I could think of is Alfred Hitchcock. He liked to put himself in the movie, just kind of in the scene somewhere, but wasn't as dramatic. He usually didn't have a line. It was just he'd be reading the paper as he
Yeah,
panned by or something like that.
yeah.
So yeah, but I love that kind of stuff where they just kind of seem. Rod seemed like the perfect omniscient narrator because he's always present. He's literally
Mm.
everywhere. He's just off camera all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, he's great.
Yeah,
He's just amazing. And yeah, he's also sort of nightmarish once I paired him with the ultimate Man in Black.
right,
So after that, now when I think of Men in Black, if they don't have the dead white face, you know, then I think of him. So
right, yeah. But
sorry,
he
Will
was kind
Smith.
of
I don't think of you. I love you, Will Smith, but I don't think of you. I think of Rod Serling. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it's funny too because he was anything but sinister in real life. Like he had so many messages that he wanted. I mean, that was kind of the impetus for the Twilight Zone was he was tired of having to fight with people and censors to get some of his social messages across, or any of
Hmm.
his social messages across. And there's a famous conflict where it's talked about quite a bit, where he had written a story that was inspired by the murder of Emmett Till, and once he said that, and it was fine until he said in an interview that that was the inspiration for it, and then all of a sudden the networks got nervous and they changed the story around. And he had a Jewish man being killed in the story instead of a black man. They changed it again. It was just kind of a guy from a different country, and they moved the setting from the South to New England so that they wouldn't upset people in the Midwest and in the South. They wouldn't upset their sponsors and all that, you know. And that was kind of what eventually led to Serling being like, I want my own show because but I think that's also instructive because he had to change. Well, he didn't. The other producers did. You could see how like, oh, this story is fine as long as you change everything about it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
from Serling's perspective, it's like, well, why not space aliens then? And it was
yeah.
like fly under the radar with these social messages if the characters
Mhm.
came off of a flying saucer or existed in some like phantom realm. Because people would, oh, it's just goofy sci-fi, but it had a powerful message hidden in
Yeah. And okay, I'm just gonna say it. There's all of these, people online who are supposedly Star Trek fans, and they say stuff like, "When did Star Trek get woke?" I'm like, dude, what show have you been watching?
there. Right.
Like
Yeah.
the original show is all woke all the time, so woke.
Yeah.
It's Roddenberry made it to be woke. He, like Serling, wanted to tell those stories. And so I can just see somebody, when did the Twilight Zone get woke? Well,
Yeah. I mean,
maybe go
that's kind
back
of
and
the
watch it and use your brain, use your thinking brain and your listening ears and, pay attention and then you might see it. But
right. See, this is the thing that kind of a lot of the real geeks and nerds for this stuff I think, kind of saw this all along. We always could a lot of us could relate to it better because we felt a little bit more outcast, you know.
Mhm.
But for a general audience, just watching, Star Trek as a space western and
Yeah.
seeing who Kirk beats up and then sleeps with the Green Lady or something and saves the day. Uh,
Yeah.
or the Twilight Zone is just spooky stories with flying saucers and monsters and things, and it's like, yeah, I mean, it can be both, though. It is both of those things, and we were kind of talking before we started recording. There was a lot of overlap between Star Trek and the Twilight Zone. A lot of the original Trek actors appeared on the Zone, and some of the writers would go back and forth as well. I think Beaumont
Mhm.
wrote some Star Trek, and some of it was based on Matheson stories. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and there's lots of guest stars in Common as well.
right.
And rewatching, suddenly I'm like, oh, I know who that is. That's Susan Oliver. She was in the cage. Oh, Zach is like, he came in just in time for me to talk to the TV and say that, and he's just like, oh, she was
Yeah.
in Star Trek, wasn't she? Yeah, okay. I just had to go to the bathroom, and I'm gonna go back to my recording and let you be a nerd over there,
Right,
nerd
right.
girl. You know. But yeah, there's a lot of overlap thematically as well.
Yeah.
And so it was the time period. There was a sort of an artistic understanding of social issues and a desire to talk about those things. But both of them sort of took science fiction and used that as a medium
Hmm.
to talk about those issues and get people to look at things maybe in a slightly skewed way. This is almost like it was coming in under the radar for people,
Right.
and the message, sometimes the message came out and hit you in the head, but a lot of times it did. It kind of just flew in just a little bit and sort of snuck in on you. And when you think about it later, maybe days later, or you talk about it with the guy at work, and you realize, wait a minute, oh, it's like that whole communist thing. Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, wow. But it
Right.
was about monsters.
Yeah. Well, and some of those writers were like investigated as communists back then. Like, I found an FBI file on Bradbury once.
Oh yeah,
Bradbury's file. Yeah.
I would not be surprised by any of that. I believe that Roddenberry was investigated as well. I would not be surprised if Serling was investigated. Again, it's because of the content of their stories and what they were trying to convey. You know, apparently, normal Americans, you can kind of sneak stuff past them, but I guess the guys in the FBI are just way too advanced and they notice every little thing. So they're like, we
Well,
gotta
J.
we gotta
Edgar
watch this
Hoover,
guy.
anyway.
Yeah, no, we
Yeah.
got to watch this guy. Uh, uh, while I'm polishing my lady's shoes, I will watch this guy and keep an
Yeah.
eye on him. Bring me his file. You know.
Right. Um, yeah. I mean, we have to kind of recognize too that, particularly with Star Trek, it was really Lucille Ball that got that
Mm-hmm.
going, because I think with Twilight Zone, it was Sterling was able to pitch it and get it going and get it to work because producers and executives at the networks maybe wouldn't have caught on to what he was doing. You know,
Yeah.
like I feel like people at the top of the networks were probably too dumb to figure it out, but
Yeah.
audiences mostly got it.
Yeah.
Where Star Trek had an advantage, where Desilu Productions was bankrolling it, and it actually kind of bankrupted Desilu Productions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's how
I
much she believed in it, you know.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
People always, they just think she was just a comic actress and really good at slapstick. And she wasn't. She was really, really bright
right.
and, a good writer herself. And yeah, she really believed in the whole Star Trek idea and the ideals of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
I consider her the mother of Star Trek. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would too. I almost give her more credit than Roddenberry himself because.
yeah, he had great ideas, but if she hadn't, thrown the money at it and,
Yeah.
you know, fussed at the network, then
Yeah.
it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's all important stuff to keep in mind as we go down the list because, well, we mentioned that there were some Star Trek actors in the Twilight Zone before Trek happened because I think Star Trek started in '66. Is that right?
Hmm.
Am I getting that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So by that time, Twilight Zone had ended, I
Yeah.
think. But yeah, you had George Takei was in an episode that was so controversial that they wouldn't rerun it until
Yeah.
like the '90s, I think.
And that's when I saw it. So yeah.
Yeah, I only saw
Um,
it because I had a collection. It was like a VHS collection that you could buy, and that was like on the bonus tape. You know,
this has been hidden for years, but now
right?
you, because you bought this collection, get to witness this.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then we mentioned before recording, Leonard Nimoy was in one of the wartime episodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I don't know about you, but this is my own little sticking point. I'm never as enthusiastic about the ones that take place during a war or the ones that take place in the Old West. Those are
Yeah.
they're lower tier for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I will agree because, yeah, Leonard Nimoy was in that episode, but I was kind of like,
Yeah,
it
it was
was a good
more.
episode, but
It
it
was. Yeah.
but it wasn't. I didn't get really excited about it. Though the one war episode that I did like a lot wasn't really the war; it was the aftermath.
Yeah.
Or there's the ones where there is no war until suddenly there is, and then there's
Yeah.
the aftermath, and so it
Right.
tells a different story. But when you're in the middle of the war, it's not nearly as entertaining. And the old west ones are kind of like,
Right. And I think that's just down to the fact that westerns were really popular on TV and in the
mm-hmm.
movies. Like people loved westerns, so they kind of just had to do that.
Well,
No, catering to that.
it was in the golden age of westerns at that
Right.
time, which
Yeah.
lasted for a very long time in Hollywood. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just not as crazy about those ones, unfortunately, because I feel like there are good stories, but was it like The Fourth is Made of Phantoms? That one's kind of cool, but that's
yeah.
more of a time travel one. But yeah. But speaking of war or the aftermath of war, one of the episodes that you brought up prior to getting ready for the show was two. That's kind of an interesting one. That's like a deep cut.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's it has barely any dialogue.
Right.
Um and it has two characters, and they are two individuals who were on opposite sides of the war. They were both in the military. You know this because they're wearing military uniforms. Interesting ideas of military uniforms. And one of them is an extremely young Charles Bronson. Like
Hmm.
so young, I was like, did they iron his face out? What
Right.
happened? Oh my God. Because even when he was younger in the Westerns, he just looked scraggy and rugged and like they
Right.
chipped him out of stone. But this, it was a baby face. I was like, I have never seen him look like that young. I guess
Right.
it was before he got typecast and he had to like, run sandpaper over his face every morning to rough it up and
Yeah.
make it scary. Um, and his voice was different too because he was younger probably and he hadn't smoked as much yet, so he didn't have the sort of rough voice. And then the counterpart on the other side of the war was Elizabeth Montgomery from
Yeah.
Bewitched. um she also looks like a baby. She is very young in this. And basically they meet up in the ruins of a city. And it's post-apocalyptic. You don't see anybody else. So
Hmm.
somehow these two survived. We don't know how, but they're there and they interact and react to each other with barely any dialogue.
Yeah. Yep. And we're kind of led to believe that they're like the last two people on Earth, or for all
or at least in this area.
For all intents and purposes, they might as well be, and they're still enemies.
Yeah. At the very beginning, they are not friendly.
Yeah,
there is no friendliness.
and it just kind of goes to the absurdity of it. Like you mentioned, the uniforms. It looked like they went out of their way to not try to portray this as like America versus Russia or something like that.
Although she did speak Russian.
Yeah, there was that one Russian word. I think he did to her, right? Didn't he just say the word beautiful in Russian to her at the end?
Yeah, she and then she said it again.
Oh, okay.
Like later.
All right.
And it had to do with a dress. But they were still in their uniforms. My one quibble is they didn't look scruffy enough. Like they didn't look like they'd been living in those uniforms for a few years, but maybe if they looked too nasty, it would have turned into gray mush on the screen. So I'll give them that. It's almost like a stage play in a lot of ways.
I
Because
feel like a lot of the best episodes are like you can imagine it just being contained on a stage,
Mm-hmm. And the acting was so physical because again there's barely any dialogue, and Bronson gets most of it. So how she portrays her character is completely really through facial expression and movement. And it's so fascinating to watch her. It's like, she's in the Silly Witch show, so you don't expect that. And she was really good. And I was like, oh, wow. I totally, yeah.
She goes to change her clothes in the enlistment office, and there's all the propaganda against her side on the walls.
And she gets pissed off.
She gets pissed off, and she's like, "Oh yeah, this guy's my enemy." She starts shooting.
So she goes out. She's going to shoot him. Yeah. So she starts in, and he's like, "What? I'm not." Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a laser gun too, so it's kind of like we're pretty far removed from any reality that we know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, but they intentionally left that ambiguous, I think, because I think Rod Serling says in the intro or outro that it doesn't matter when this is because it's could be anytime.
Yeah,
this could be the fate of anywhere.
Yeah, and that's true. And there's a lot of stories in the Twilight Zone that have to do with the Cold War and have to do with atomic weapons and war itself and its futility and stupidity. And gee, I can't imagine why that would be this overarching thematic juggernaut. Really, it's just always there.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, yeah, Rod Serling was a World War II veteran. He went over there pretty young. Fresh out of high school, and then it's good. You talk about the absurdity and the cruelty and the awfulness of war. It's like he had a supply crate that was dropped for his group. I'm not sure what the proper term is. Platoon. I don't know.
Probably unit yeah. Platoon.
Yeah. And his friend was like the only other Jewish enlisted guy in his group was joking around and entertaining the guys and making them laugh, and this crate falls out of the sky and like crushes them. And it's just like the pointlessness of it all, and just like the horrible tragedy of everything, and like that kind of I mean, this is a real life thing. This isn't something that happened on the toilet. It happened right in front of him. It's horrible.
It's oh God, that's terrible. I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know about that? Yeah.
No, I didn't. That's awful. But at the same time, you can see where some of his imagination came from with that too.
Yeah, I mean, he never stopped being angry about the war, and he never stopped being angry. I mean, rightfully so, at Hitler, and I think that was part of the problem. The other interesting thing about that was he was in the Pacific Theater fighting, as a paratrooper, and he really wanted to be like kicking Nazi ass, but he was over fighting the Japanese instead.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of weird little conflicts going on with him during the war, you know.
Yeah.
But he wasn't about to take any shit when he got back.
No. No, he was not. He was not. And yeah, so you see these episodes that either have war as a direct part of it, or it's, intimate, and it starts from the first, the first season. There's
Yeah,
there's uh an episode with the H bomb, and
right.
you know it's a sad story, but
Yeah,
it starts out almost comedic. It's a
yeah,
little nebbishy guy who works as a bank teller, and he has a book in his lap. And I remember this from childhood, teenhood, not childhood, because I was basically that guy. I always had
yeah,
my book open in geometry class or algebra, and I was reading because I didn't give a shit about the math. So I was,
yeah.
and it always got taken away from me. So he gets hollered at by his boss about it, and it turns out his wife is awful to him and doesn't let him read at home. So
Yeah,
that's why he's taken to reading at work. And there's, these scenes with his wife, and she's just a harridan, tearing up
right.
his books and covering them up with ink. She writes in them, and
Yeah,
blanks out the words, and she's just terrible. And you watch that, and she's so over the top and so awful that you're like, God, I wish she just, oh,
right.
this woman's terrible.
But
And
he's so put upon. He never fights back, really. He just kind of
he just,
accepts. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. He tries to get past her and his boss. And then, the last day at work, he decides to hide inside the bank vault to have
yeah,
his lunch and read in peace. And he's reading a newspaper headline about, oh, the H bomb. We got the H bomb. It destroys everything. And then
yeah.
there's this huge crashing boom, and we can all guess what that was. And he comes out of the vault, and the entire world is destroyed. It's all rubble. He goes all through the rubble. He can't find anybody who's alive, and he goes to his house, which is rubble, and his wife isn't there. And, you're sitting there cheering, going, yay, at least she got what she deserved. Evil woman. And he's just completely depressed about everything because he's the only person left. And then he finds food, and he's like, well, I won't starve. And then he finds either the remains of a bookstore or a library.
I think
It's
he's at
not,
the library. Yeah,
yeah, it's not super clear. I think it's the library, and he's so thrilled. And he has all these books, and suddenly he realizes, I have all the time in the world
yeah.
to
Time
read.
enough at last. Yeah,
Yes, time enough at last. That's the title of the story. And then yeah, I'm not going to say
yeah,
how it ends, but it ends so sadly, and you just, man,
yeah.
it's
It's not fair.
heart-wrenching.
It's not fair. There was
It
time now.
There was time, there was so much time, and it's just not fair. I'm like, yeah, yeah. But that's kind
Yeah,
of like,
he's great though. I mean,
oh,
we have Burgess Meredith. We have to give him a
he was amazing in that.
because as far as lead appearances in the Twilight Zone, he had more appearances than anybody else except Jack Klugman. He and
Hmm.
Jack Klugman were both in 4 episodes as like a lead character. So and I think Meredith gets one over on Klugman because he did the narration for the Twilight Zone movie that came out in the '80s
That's right, he did.
in
I
place of
remember
Rod
that now.
Serling. So yeah,
Yeah,
they brought him in. Yeah, because Rod Serling had died by that point. Uh, Again, too many cigarettes. So um,
yeah.
but yeah, Burgess Meredith um, in a really entertaining episode called Dingle the Strong.
I haven't
Where
rewatched that one, so yeah, but I know
yeah,
about it.
yeah, I mean that one's great because it has Don Rickles in it, so I'm going to recommend that one. And then uh, the obsolete man was one that I was thinking of, because he's a librarian in that, in an
Hmm.
authoritarian world where like, if you can't serve your purpose, you're just put to death.
Which is just great.
Yeah, because it seems eerily similar to
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah, and that's
Certain, yeah,
yeah.
insurance company people.
That one to me seemed like a shrunk down version of Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah.
Um, where there's that librarian that was secretly hoarding books in that book, and the firemen come and burn the house down, and then the librarian won't leave, and she gets burned up with the books. You know,
Yeah.
it reminded me of that. But yeah, Burgess Meredith, he's an all star on the show.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, at least in Time Enough at Last, I knew it was him, but he
Mm,
doesn't sound like him or look like him. I knew exactly who he was
right.
because I can read. Um, but if I had just like watched it, because he has a very distinctive voice.
Yeah.
But he was younger, and so he didn't use that voice, and he didn't have quite as much of a scraggly, croaky kind of sound to his voice. It wasn't so gravelly. And
Yeah, I
so
wonder how much of that was an affect
it,
for art, and how much, because I mean, I basically knew him from those Twilight Zone episodes, and where he more or less sounded the same. He was a little bit mousier in
yeah.
Time Enough at
Yeah.
Last, but the other ones, his voice was kind of normal. But then I knew him as the Penguin in
Yeah.
the Adam West Batman series, and just like, I always got confused, because I'm like, is this two different guys with really similar names, or because
No.
he's so different.
Yeah.
But then later, much later, he's in like the Rocky movies,
Yeah.
and he was in a really bizarre movie with Anthony Hopkins as a ventriloquist. You know this one?
Yes. It's very creepy. I hate ventriloquist dummies. Probably because of Rod Serling in the Twilight Zone. Uh,
Yeah, I think there's at least two episodes with a
uh-huh.
ventriloquist dummy.
Yep.
But
Hid behind the couch for those. Did
yeah,
not like. I like them now, but when
yeah,
I was little, I was like, oh, those things come alive and they walk around at night. Nope. Those are made of nope. I don't like them, Dad. I'm gonna hide back here.
yeah. I mean, that's another thing that's kind of become a trope, but was new back then. Really, I mean, I think there is that uncanny valley aspect to a ventriloquist dummy, but the Twilight Zone seems to me to be one of the first to really play with that.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
Before that, it was all, Charlie McCarthy and Mortimer Snerd and Edgar Bergen, and it was all ha ha funny,
yeah,
and nobody thought it was scary at all. And then, Rod Serling was like, hold my beer. Yeah, I'm gonna fix that for y'all.
one thing that's great about Edgar Bergen and his many characters is that his ventriloquist act was largely done on the radio.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I just looked it up. That movie, the ventriloquist movie, is magic,
Yep.
and I heard they were going to remake this, and I can't understand why you would,
You don't
because
need to.
yeah, the first one you had Anthony Hopkins and Burgess Meredith, and I feel like there were a couple other big names in it, but
There
yeah,
were.
you
It's
can't beat that.
it's a really good movie. It's
Bizarre,
very creepy, very bizarre. And when it came out, I was older enough to,
right?
deal with the fact that, yeah, but it still was, I wasn't behind the couch, but I because
It's
I
an
remember when it was on
uncomfortable watch.
HBO. It was, yeah,
Yeah, it's uncomfortable for sure, but
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, Burgess Meredith, an all star. Like I said, Jack Klugman was in 4 episodes as well. Um, People would know him from like The Odd Couple,
yeah,
was kind of like his biggest thing. Um, but this is a little Twilight Zone trivia. And speaking of a guy that's just always kind of in the background, is Robert, or sometimes listed as Bud McCord, was in like 167 episodes. And he's always kind of like an extra or a minor character, only has a line or two.
Yeah.
That's the guy that has the actual record for most appearances.
Yeah. Yeah. Those guys, the character actor guys that, I'm turning into my father because whenever we'd watch anything, and I grew up with the Stooges as well every
Right.
Saturday. And, Abbott and Costello, the Bowery Boys, all of this stuff that is ancient.
Yeah.
It's just bloody ancient at this
Yeah.
point. But he knew every character actor, everyone,
Right.
all of them. So, he could, if you played Trivial Pursuit with him, don't play the silver screen edition because he knows all of those guys by name. I might know them by their faces and go, "Oh, it's that guy that was in that episode of Gunsmoke or something,"
Yeah. Yep.
Or I'll recognize somebody who is on Gunsmoke, is on Star Trek, is on, the
Right.
Twilight Zone or whatever. But I wouldn't know their names. And man, he'd just pop out with their names. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I can be kind of like that. I mean, I'm kind of obnoxiously encyclopedia brained in that respect.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about the episode 2 and Elizabeth Montgomery, and you're just saying like the witchy lady from Bewitched. But Dick York was also in an episode, and he played
Yep.
Darren on Bewitched, and
Yep.
that's a crazy
Darren
episode.
1 or Darren 2?
It was the first Darren,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
and he
I
had
never
he
paid attention
actually.
to him. I'm like Endora. He was Durwood. I don't know.
Well, he was a really great comic actor.
He
Actually,
is.
the Twilight Zone episode he was in, it's like he flips a coin and it lands on its side, and that's the inciting event that spurs the rest of the action. So it's wild. I'll have to tell people to look that one up. But speaking of Endora, this is funny because I think this is the third episode where we've mentioned Agnes Moorehead for completely different reasons. But
Yeah.
but you had talked about this being one of your favorites as well, The Invaders.
So good. Okay, so if he didn't know about the Hopkinsville goblins, I would be
Yeah.
so surprised. So surprised. So, but there isn't a whole family of hillbillies in this
Well, this
episode. It's just
right.
one hillbilly lady. The
Yeah.
one Meemaw. And
Yeah.
it's Agnes Moorehead being Meemaw.
This is a
And
Matheson episode, right?
yes,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's so beautifully written. And basically what happens is she's minding her own business at night in a, no electricity cabin, no running water cabin,
Yeah.
and she's cooking dinner or something, and it's just very dark. Everything looks like it's lit by candlelight. So they did a really good job with the way they lit it to, have it everything be visible that was necessary without it looking like, they had a studio light right on it. They did a great job with this. This is another one with the camera angles that's just perfection. And she's stirring a pot, and then she hears this weird noise. And then she hears a thud on her roof.
Yeah.
And that starts it.
Right.
And as I was watching it, I'm like, this is so Hopkinsville. So Hopkinsville. She is basically being terrorized by two little guys in suits, little spacesuit guys.
Yeah.
And I think they did a really good job with making them frightening, even though they're just two little puppet guys.
Well, I think Matheson was really upset by how they looked. Like he
was,
had
but it
he had a
still
completely
works.
different idea. It works. I think it works just fine. But I mean, I think
Mhm.
he was really frustrated because they do kind of look like little wind up toy robots.
They do. But then they start stabbing her, and
Right.
and then it's like, oh, whoa, no.
Yeah. Now it's
Then we're
on.
back in the the living doll and the ventriloquist dummies and
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know why I collect dolls because they're all really creepy, but whatever. But
As long as they don't start talking to you.
yeah. Ooh, It depends on what they say, I guess. But she's just so, again, she is a really good actress. She had a long career in Hollywood before she worked on TV, and she was just amazing in this. She doesn't say anything at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah,
She
no
she makes
lines.
noises
Right.
of, frustration or exertion as she's fighting off these little evil creatures. And she
Yeah.
climbs up on her, up through her attic up on the roof, and there's a UFO there. It's a
Right.
saucer. It's a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Doesn't have markings on it. And yeah, I was just like, it just reminded me, because no matter what she does to them, they keep coming back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, it's just like the Hopkinsville goblins, man.
Right.
She's beating them with you know everything she can get her hands on,
Yeah.
and
Hitting
and
him with a
stomping
broom
them.
and kicking
Yeah,
him out the window and stuff.
yeah, throwing
Yeah.
them, throwing
Yeah.
stuff at them, and just, I think, did she get a cast iron pan after him? I feel like
Yeah, I think she at
I feel
least
like
threatened him
she,
with it.
yeah, I feel like she did. And
She got shot with their weapons at one point, and it kind of
yeah,
flickered her skin, and she's like trying to fix it, and
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and
Really great performance on her part, and that one was on at the bar once. I was at a bar, and that was just on the TV, and
oh wow.
I was distracted in watching it, and then the bartender and a couple other people around. I'm like, this episode is fucking great, and then they see like the little spaceman
Mhm.
creatures, and they're laughing at it, and I'm like, no, just keep watching, and they like actually turned the volume up and watched the whole episode, and they were like, what? No, oh my god. Like it blew people's mind.
I know, right? And that's the thing is, once you get into it and you really start watching it, she carries it.
Yeah,
All through the, okay, it's this little wind up guy. Well, it's a wind up guy that's shooting you with some kind of laser weapon, and,
right.
you know, freezing your hand and then stabbing you with your knife that you're trying to get them with.
Yeah,
It's a really good episode.
and to use the like stagecraft kind of analogy again of like a stage play where you're watching it in front of you, um, I would recommend people watch this with some suspension of disbelief and use your imagination a little bit, because if you were watching a play, you'd have to kind of imagine the setting, right?
Yeah,
That it's
right.
and you kind of have to do the same thing here. Like, I don't think the special effects are terrible for the time or anything like that, or at all. But I would much rather have limited special effects that are practical with a really good story than the best special effects in the world with a lackluster story and
Yeah,
bad
or a
acting.
bad actor,
Right?
and she was great.
Yeah,
And you know, I never thought, why doesn't she say anything? Because she was by herself.
yeah,
There was nobody for her to talk to.
right.
And then I was like, I wonder
You
if,
find out at the end. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, you find out at the end what's going on. But um it all through it, every time I'd start to think, well, maybe she's mute, or I don't know,
I'll
Mima's
tell you,
can
the
be
first time
weird.
I saw it, it never occurred to me that she wasn't saying anything. It didn't even occur to me. It was just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
she didn't have any lines, but
She didn't have any time, I guess, for what are you gonna do? Talk to
yeah,
these little guys.
yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't, who are you?
Makes
What
it
do you
that much more
want?
suspenseful too, because you don't really everything
Mhm.
you know about what her thought process is conveyed through her face and
And
just
her
kind of
actions.
her actions and her kind of nonverbal stuff that like you said, she'll make a noise and you could tell she's frustrated or scared or
Yeah. In
exerting herself.
pain, or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and
I
she
I
does it all
really,
without language.
and like, she was good as Endora, but dang, as nonverbal Mima, she was perfect.
She was great. Yeah. Um, One little weird factoid with her is she was in The Conqueror with John Wayne. It
Mm,
was the last. I was like John Wayne as Genghis Khan.
which is what what I remember that movie. What?
But it was mostly filmed like somewhere where a bunch of fallout had dropped from atomic bomb testing, and like pretty much everybody that involved with that movie got cancer and died. It's like crazy.
Wow. Good grief.
Yeah,
What did they
yeah,
throw
that's
them
a.
out in white sands or something?
It was like downwind of White Sands, I guess.
Okay, yeah. Well,
And then to make it even worse, just because they wanted when they went back to the soundstage and they were going to shoot other footage, they wanted the sand to match, so they brought sand back with them from that.
great.
No, I've looked into this, and like a lot of people involved did die of cancer, and it might have been from that. As far as John Wayne himself, he smoked like 5 packs a day. So
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's that's a lot of smoking, you know. So, but yeah, that movie might have killed Moorhead and a bunch of other people besides. So
That's really awful.
yeah,
Just bringing in the freaking sand.
you're bringing it with you.
Dude, there's other white sands in the world. I'm just saying. I'm just
I know you have
saying.
the Mojave Desert right there when you go back to
You just go
Hollywood.
get some plain old, you know, sand. Just
Put
I
put some
guess.
kind of filter on your lens or something to make it match. You know,
Yeah, I know, right?
it's
Or,
it's weird.
or maybe just not go into the radioactive area. I don't know. Of course,
Well, I
they
mean,
may not have
they knew
actually
a lot,
known.
right? Yeah, they didn't know. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot less was known about it at the time. You know,
Yeah, that
the
was
government wasn't talking so much about it. So
yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They weren't. I
right.
mean, yeah. They didn't warn anybody in New Mexico when they tested the first one. So, mm, yeah, don't
Yeah,
look out your door. Maybe
yeah,
go on vacation. Don't maybe go underground and live there for I don't know, a few years. Just
yeah,
yeah, I remember in the 80s when they showed The Day After. I think that was the name of it, but it was the movie with Jason Robards that was about, oh, what would happen if the Russians and the United States finally decided to destroy everything with having a nuclear war. And everybody watched it. It was horrible and it was horrific, and none of us liked it. And
yeah.
it really did not help our nerves at all.
Yeah, it
Um,
traumatized like a whole generation, I think.
yep,
Yeah,
sure did. It was like I think it was the year before or after I graduated from high school, but it primo, perfect. Gen
yeah,
X, everybody loved that. It was great because by the time we were in school, they stopped that crawl under your desk because at that point it was that's not really going to help. So we'll just stop doing that to the kids, because they used to have these air raid drills and you crawl
yeah,
under your desk and cover your face and yeah, whatever. So Gen X, instead of that, we got Jason Robards' hair falling out and
yeah.
dying of teeth falling out and all that. It's terrible.
Good God. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was great stuff.
Well,
Uh,
that's the thing is like truth is actually a lot scarier than fiction. A lot of
yeah,
these,
it sure
like
is.
you talk about like the radium girls, like those poor girls that were
Mm-hmm.
putting radioactive things in watches and the shit
Yep.
that happened to them as a result of that. Like you said, like teeth falling out, and just a
Yep.
slow, horrible death. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
And they were paid pennies, because
Yeah.
of course,
Right. Yeah.
capitalism. It's great. Uh, but yeah, I used to say to my dad, I was like, oh, and that was the same year that they showed color film. I think it was on 60 Minutes. I don't know. It may have been another news show showed it, but it was the Nagasaki survivors that were
Yeah.
filmed near the time of the bombs. And I just remember looking at my dad. I'm like, how could they have done that?
Yeah.
How? It's not right. And he said, well, they did need to end the war, and it did save a lot of lives in Japan and the United States because that they otherwise it was going to be an invasion, and Hirohito had told his people they would fight to the last man, woman, and child.
Right.
And as a young person, I just could not I was like, they had to have known something. They had to have known. Now I know, no, they really didn't.
Yeah.
They really didn't know. Does this make it better? No, it doesn't really. I'm still mad about it. I'll probably die mad about that.
Yeah,
But
I mean, that's the thing is like I'm mad about war regardless, just any aspect of
yeah,
war. Like
yeah.
there really isn't a good reason for us to be killing each other, you know.
No, it's
So
stupid.
I mean, people love to pick sides, and I'm like, I just would rather people aren't killing each other. That's kind of where I'm at, at all on any
Yeah.
side, like. I feel like
War
that's the way Rod Serling was, and he was anti-war more than anything else.
yeah.
But he was very good at pointing out what leads people to it, you know.
Mhm. And
Um,
that's what a lot of his stories were about, even when it didn't really seem like they were about it.
yeah, and they'll sucker punch you that way, right?
Yeah.
It's like because you're watching kind of well, I mean, there is an air of paranoia to a lot of it. Like rewatching the monsters the monsters are due on Maple Street
I was
in
going to bring
order,
it up if you didn't.
right?
Yes.
In order to do this show, I'm like, well, I got to watch that one again. And I was at the end of it. I mean, post Trump being reelected, I was like, oh, shit, we are so screwed.
Yeah.
Like,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, he was talking about the Red Scare,
yeah,
obviously, in this, and he was also talking about how easily humans can be manipulated.
yep,
Just and speaking of paranormal stuff, the 8-year-old kid, I don't know his real name, that
yeah,
basically uh a meteor goes over, makes weird
right.
noise, weird light in the
And then there's
sky,
a blackout.
and then all the electricity goes out and cars won't start. So this is yep, high strangeness is happening. And there's this kid, all the neighbors, they all come out of their houses and they're all like, what's going on? Oh,
Yeah,
and did you hear that? Did you see that? Hey, I'm going to try to start my car. Oh, it's not starting. And this kid who I just called him John Keel Jr. Basically says, "Oh, well, it was that thing that flew overhead." And
hmm,
then he starts talking about, oh, that's why the electricity's out. It caused a power surge, and they're putting the electricity out to keep us confused. And they're like, they who?
right.
They who? And he's like, it's aliens. And then his mom comes up, oh, little Johnny here. I think his name was Joey, but I thought
Yeah,
of him as little John
reading his
Keel.
comic books, like
Is he just
yeah,
reads the comic books and everything? But some of the men decide, hey, we should go uptown and ask the police what's going on. The phones aren't working, the cars aren't working. We'll just walk uptown. And the kid is like, no, mister, don't go. They don't want you to. They
right.
really don't want you to. And everything is about they don't want you to. And then little other things start happening. Like one guy is trying to start his car and then it starts.
Or it starts when he's not even in it.
Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah,
starts
and then
without
the lights
anybody in
turn
it.
on. Yeah, and then
it,
the lights turn
it
on in his house, and yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And then the kid is like, they have people living among us that look just like us. That they're
right,
they're infiltrating. They came first.
right, yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
kid, you're not helping.
yeah. But I mean, this is the kind of thing where people just immediately start turning their swords on each other.
Yep.
And there's one guy that's just trying to be the voice of reason. I forgot the actor's name, but he
Claude
went on.
Akins.
Yes, he went on to play Sheriff Lobo later.
Yep. Yep.
um, uh, yeah, he's like the only voice of reason there, and everybody else is like freaking out. And he can calm people down, but only so far, you
Yeah.
know. And they start lobbing accusations at each other. Where like the guy whose lights came on, it's like there's a woman that lives across the street. She's like, well, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I've seen him just standing in his yard, like he's looking up at the
Staring up at
sky,
the sky.
like he's waiting for something, like
Yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, okay. People don't look at the stars in this town, I guess.
Right. And then he even says, like, insomnia. He's like, that's what you're accusing me of. I have insomnia. It's like, I have a hard time getting to sleep. Like, like, is that a crime?
But
Yeah.
yeah, it is a
That's
crime,
what it,
apparently.
yeah. Well, that's what it becomes is everybody turns against everybody else. And I mean, pretty much by the end of it, it's like a melee.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. They're chasing each other around, and one guy shoots another guy.
yeah, they shoot the guy from the next neighborhood
Block
over.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah. And it's great because
Well,
it's
you'd think that would be the sobering moment, right? Where Claude Akins is shaking the guy by his big, stupid Hawaiian shirt and being like, "You shot the man. You killed him." He's like, "You didn't know. I didn't know who he was. You got to believe me. I didn't know." And then it's like, but instead, everybody turns on that guy. They're like, "Oh, you were quick to accuse everybody. So what are you hiding? Maybe,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
you would think that that would be a sobering enough thing where like a man is dead here. Maybe we took this too far, but no. Instead, it just everybody gets riled up again, and they're all at each other's throats again, like right away.
Yeah.
And we can spoil this one, I guess, because it's
Yeah,
just
because it doesn't make sense unless you do it. You can spoil it.
yeah. The flying
It's your
saucer is
show.
sitting up on the hillside. Yeah, that's right. It's my show. I'll do whatever I damn well want. But there's a flying saucer sitting up on the hill, and the aliens are just like controlling everything from up there.
Yeah.
It's like one
And
of
they're
them
the
says,
ones turning on the lights and turning them
"Yeah,
off. And
yeah, messing with people." And he's like, "So that's the process then?" And he's like, "Yep, pretty much with minor variations. You just do this in a small community, and it completely destabilizes it. Like humans are very predictable. Like they'll
like,
all just tear each other to pieces."
and we don't
And
have to do anything but, turn on their lights and turn off their lights and scare them a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah,
I loved that.
just
Uh,
terrifying.
and wow,
Yeah.
he's not wrong.
Well, the ending narration, I actually made sure I had it ready because this, yeah, I would like, I got chills hearing Rod read this at the end. And he says, the tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices only to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy, and a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own for the children and the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined in the Twilight Zone. So,
Yeah. See, I got chills, and you're not even Rod Serling.
yeah,
Uh, it's a horrific, and it's so current.
yeah, it's timeless in a way that sucks. Like it's
Yeah,
like he
yeah,
says in there, like it's a pity that we can't just keep this in this fictional realm, you know. Um, but it is a very real thing, and these are things words can kill, thoughts can kill, prejudices can kill,
hmm
and it really just makes me like every asshole troll that I've ever encountered on Twitter that's just harangued me for overreacting to things. It's like, no, dude, these things do kill people. They do. You just want to like grab them by the lapels and shake them, like Claude Akins does with that guy at the end of the episode.
yeah.
Like, look what you've done. Like you've
Yep.
killed a man. It's oh, oh, that's a heavy one.
And of course, the excuse he gave was, "Well, I didn't know it was him."
Right.
You're okay.
Yeah.
Nobody taught you gun safety. I'm sorry. You're supposed to be sure of your target before you pull the trigger. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, we see this like the man standing on the lawn looking at his sky is just an insomniac, and we do this nowadays with like tweets. We'll find an old tweet that somebody tweeted, and their whole identity becomes based on that one thing they
One
said once,
tweet.
like 10 years here. Like, and I don't know, it could be the same as a guy standing out on his lawn, like having a
Yeah.
rough time, because he can't sleep. I think we're quick to judge people and divide, and that only benefits the people at the controls.
Yeah.
Is really what I want to
I
get
wish
across
it was
with my
aliens. I really do.
yeah, me too, because they probably have better things to do than.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, no, except for
Yeah,
in To Serve Man. That's different. They would
yeah.
like to
To
serve
serve
man.
man, I mean,
That is the
that's
classic
the
episode that
classic of
everybody
classics.
knows.
Yeah, and it's not as heavy. I mean, it's got a great twist, but it's not heavy in the way that the monsters are due on Maple Street. And both Rod Serling stories, so that really kind of gives you the full scope of Serling's acumen with writing these stories.
Yeah.
Especially aliens. I mean, we are talking aliens, flying saucers.
Oh yeah.
Really interesting ways of looking at this. So
Yeah. Yeah. To Serve Man that's one of the ones I saw in reruns as a kid, and it did put me behind the couch again because it was the big headed guy.
yeah,
I don't like the big headed guys, man. I
yeah,
from
big headed
childhood
tall
that
guy too.
yeah,
Yeah,
big Tall, not Ted
yeah,
Cassidy. He was the other guy. I was sure it was Ted Cassidy, but I
right.
remembered wrong.
Yeah, and Ted Cassidy played Lurch on the Addams Family. So yeah,
Yeah.
but it was Richard Keel, a very young Richard Keel, who was known for playing Jaws in
Yep.
one of the Bond movies. I forget which one that is.
There's two he's in.
Oh, okay.
I think
Um,
is he in Thunderball? He's not in Thunderball. Maybe he is. Maybe it is
is it
Thunderball
Diamonds Are
he's in.
no?
He's
What's the
in
one with
one
lasers in it?
Moonraker. He's in Moonraker, but
Moonraker.
he's in
Right.
another one.
Yeah. Okay. But I know he was also in a really bad movie called EGOT.
Oh God, that's right. He was. That is a
Like a kid.
terrible movie.
He's like
It's
a kid.
fun in a terrible way.
Yeah. There's a lot. I found a lot of adjacent terrible movies in doing research for the show, and it was like Charles Beaumont wrote The Queen of Outer Space, and I was like, "What?" He wrote it like as a satire, and then they just kind of faithfully made the movie as a serious movie, and that's why it's such a mess. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's the one with Zsa Zsa Gabor as like a Venusian on a
Oh
flying
wow.
saucer.
That could be really funny and
It
fun
is.
if they
It
had
is
done it
fun.
right.
Yeah. Well, doing it wrong is equally funny, I think.
Well,
It's
that's
just,
true. That's true.
but yeah, to serve man, we have the Canimets that come down, and they're these tall, big-headed aliens, and they're here to like help us out and give
Make
us.
our lives better.
This is where I feel like the disclosure people really want this,
Yes.
and they don't understand the ending that's possible here. But disclosure people think that the ETs are going to come down and give us the technology, and all of the world's problems will be solved, right?
Right. Which is what
Yeah.
happens in the episode. All the world's problems are solved.
Yep.
We have enough energy. We don't have to fight wars about it. We have enough food.
Hmm.
It's wonderful.
People
And
are fattened up nicely, and
mhm, yeah, yeah, yeah,
the Canimets know how to serve man.
yep, yep. And they give us their manifesto,
Right.
but it's in their language, which we can't
Yep.
read
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah. Well,
until
you know what I
one
liked
lady
about that?
figures it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Very end of the episode. Yeah. You know what I really liked about the Canimets in that episode is they seem to be talking like telepathically. Like his
Mm-hmm.
mouth doesn't move; you just hear the voice.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's really cool because that happens a lot in like
Yep.
contactee stories and alien encounters.
Yeah.
Um, the kind of telepathic thing. I have a theory that at least Richard Matheson was reading like Fate magazine back then.
I think so. I
I
think
don't know
quite a
about the
few
other ones.
writers at that time
Yeah,
were.
yeah. 'Cause some of his stories I feel like are just like real life stories that he turned into a fictional story.
Mm-hmm.
One that I had written down was like it was The Last Flight. It's a World War I pilot that lands in a World War II airfield,
Yes. That's a great one.
and that has so much crossover with actual stories in the UK of
Yeah.
time slips in the air where pilots had flown through like kind of a time slip thing. And I'm like, I think I have a Fate magazine from around like 1959 that has that story in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's lots of stories about time slips with airplanes. Of course, the Bermuda Triangle is classic.
right.
But there are there are stories of a plane flying into a cloud bank and then coming out the other side, both as a fictional thing, but it's also in weird story, weird true story reports and things.
Yeah.
That and Jenny Randles wrote a whole book about it called Time Storms.
Right.
And although in hers it was usually cars, like you would drive through a weird fog, or there'd be like a cloud on the ground, and you drive in it, and then
Yeah,
time.
wasn't there one in that book where somebody was driving in like Mexico and then came out of the other side of the cloud in like Argentina or something?
Yep,
It's
yep,
like,
something
yeah,
like that. Yeah, that was that would mess you up like a lot.
yeah, oh yeah. You wouldn't know how to account for that for sure.
That's a no.
I feel like Jeff Ritzman had a weird story like that he told years ago, on Paratopia and on Where Did the Road Go, where he was like he was driving a route that he always took in like Delaware and then ended up somewhere like way off course, like in West Virginia or something. And like
Wow.
like they couldn't possibly have driven that far in the amount of time, and it like
That
really freaked him out, like,
yeah.
um, but yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've had minor events that I think I can chalk up to just like not keeping track of time the way I thought I was, or just, my mind wandering while I'm driving, but it's so unnerving to even end up
Yeah.
someplace you didn't mean to be or something like that. I can only
Yeah.
imagine ending up like hundreds of miles away,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's never a good thing. Um,
Yeah. And I mean, there is something about the plane because there's a bunch of episodes with planes, and those kind of tend to be my favorite because the other time slip one was the Odyssey of Flight 33,
mhm.
and that's the Sterling story where they kind of fly into a cloud and then they're flying over like dinosaurs. They
Yeah,
look out
that's
the window
right.
and there's dinosaurs and stuff, and they keep going back into the cloud and hoping to come out in their own
They
time,
just
and it's
flew
always
over
a different
Jurassic
time.
Park, dude. It was just
Yeah,
Jurassic Park, that's all. They just flew into a movie and,
yeah.
down and
And then the other classic plane one, of course, is Terror at 2,000 feet. Well, did I get the name right? Nightmare
uh,
at 20,000
not
feet. Yeah.
yeah.
With Shatner and the man on the wing.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, the
yeah,
whatever on the wing,
yeah,
the dude in the rubber mask, that's pretty creepy.
yeah. I mean, I think that was another thing that Matheson wasn't thrilled about was the appearance of that man on the wing,
Yeah,
because he wanted it to look more like the classical. See, that was kind of based on Gremlins, like the idea of
right.
Gremlins in World War II that were messing with planes and equipment and stuff. So I think he was like making it. He wanted it to look more like a little imp or something like that. Kind of what you ended up seeing in the Twilight Zone movie. They remade that with John Lithgow instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
See,
um,
they should have had Shatner again and then had an imp, and then we could compare and contrast, is the original scarier or the other one scarier? Because they're such different actors.
yeah.
I can't
Well,
really,
John Lithgow is like
I love him.
he's so good at being over the top. Like
Yeah.
if you need somebody to be over the top
Shatner.
manic,
Yeah.
yeah, like John Lithgow's your guy. Like that, I mean, he really blew that out of the water, I think. But
Oh,
I
he
mean,
did.
Shatner was good too. I mean, Shatner was great, and he was in two different episodes because he was in another
Mhm.
one called Nick of Time, um, where he's in a diner and there's a little fortune telling machine at the table, and he's like can't even leave the table because he keeps asking the fortune telling machine what he needs to do next. Um, I think that's an instructive one for people that are into divination.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you can't just keep asking.
right
Yeah.
at a certain point, you have to make your own decision and use your best judgment. You can't just
Yeah.
keep asking. So um, that's an interesting one. But uh, well, another one that wasn't specifically planes. That's more of a rocket. And when the sky was opened, did you watch this one?
No, I didn't watch this one
Oh, okay.
again.
Yeah, I don't know which ones I told you I was thinking about and which I didn't because I just got scattered notes here. But that one's like a rocket goes up and comes back down, and there's three astronauts, and then they start being erased from existence. Like,
Oh,
not just disappearing, but like one of the astronauts goes to the hospital to visit the other one, and he's not there, and nobody knows who he's talking about. They're like, "No, I
oh,
don't know anybody by that name,"
oh.
That one's wild.
Yeah, the one
Uh,
I watched with 3 astronauts was, Elegy,
okay,
and that's the one where these 3 astronauts land, and they're on this planet that there's all of this civilization, but no people except them.
right.
And so, it turns out that they've died. And the
Oh,
only
right.
person who's there is the person who's trying to get them to move along and
Yeah.
go on from. So it's a really, really odd episode. It's like it's good, but it's also kind of just odd. It didn't disquiet me at all. It just was it's just really strange.
Yeah, I think when you get into the later seasons, for one thing, they had an entire season where the episodes were an hour long, or like 50
Yeah.
minutes or whatever. But I really think that the Twilight Zone formula works best as like a tight 23, 25 minutes where you really have to, because you have to accelerate it. You have to make it
Yeah.
manic, and you have to make people behave in ways that they wouldn't in real life because you need to get all of it in there.
Yeah.
When you
It
have
makes
more time, it kind of drags it out, I think. And
Yeah, yeah, you have more of an immediacy,
right.
and you have to tell your story very, very compactly and tightly to make it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah. And Matheson, Beaumont, and Serling were all experts at that. And when you get into the
Yeah.
later seasons, I feel like they were having fun with it, with some of the ideas, and they were looking at doing spin-offs. I watched this bizarre one called uh it was the name of, it was an angel in it, and it was supposed to be like a spin-off series with like an angel that keeps getting sent to Earth, but he's like always bumbling and trying to help people. Uh, I was like, it was entertaining enough, but it was goofy, and I'm just like, this doesn't even feel like the Twilight Zone, because I guess
No.
it wasn't. It was supposed to be a trailer for something else. Um, and like Kick the Can, I watched that recently. That's kind of an odd one. Doesn't really have that same vibe. Uh, um, but yeah, I mean, some are better than others. But I mean, that first season, at least that entire first season and the second one are phenomenal. Oh,
Oh,
right. And
yeah.
then there were some episodes where they started using like video tape, or they used some kind of different film,
Yeah, they used video in a few episodes in the
like
later
the one with the,
seasons.
yeah, like the one with the car salesman, and he all of a
Yeah,
sudden can't tell a lie.
yeah,
Um,
which
and,
really it messes up his life so much.
yeah, but I found it so distracting because the film quality just wasn't as good.
Yeah,
It didn't have that cinematic feel, and I'm like, I think I would like this better if it just looked like the other episodes. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. Yeah, the ones that are done on video, you can tell, and they're
Right.
not as good,
Yeah.
because part of what really draws me in is the very cinematic feel of the cinematography and the direction.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's both cinematic, and a lot of them are like plays.
Yeah.
Like The Invaders.
Right.
Again, that could have been a whole set on a stage, and they could have used lighting to move her into different parts of her hovel,
Yeah.
her little cabin.
Right.
Um, and it would have been just as you would have been leaning in on your seat, to
Yeah.
try and see what was happening. And some of the ones without the really good film stock and the tight direction, it's not as you don't lean in and get all get your blinders on, and you're just looking at what's happening on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a couple more that are, well, there's a lot of episodes that are like that. I think all the best ones, like we had said, Perchance to Dream takes place almost entirely at first in the psychiatrist's office,
Yeah.
Um, the other shots would be difficult, but there was one that I had brought up. Let's see which. Will the real Martian please stand up is another UFO centric one, and that the
So
entire
good.
episode takes place in the diner. Like that, you could
Yep.
do that as a stage play. That would be
Yep.
amazing. Yeah.
And it feels like one as
Right.
as you're watching it. It very much, there's some beginning stuff with a couple of cops. And it's another one of those that, if you've read enough UFO cases, this sounds like so
Yeah.
believable. Like you have
At
seen.
first, at least, it feels like a reenactment of a UFO story.
Yes,
Like,
it's very archetypal. These two
Yeah.
cops are, something crashed into a pond in a snowstorm, and they see footprints leading from the pond and leading through the woods to somewhere. So they follow it,
Right. Yeah.
and they end up at this diner,
Yeah.
and there's a bus that had stopped at the diner, and the bus driver's there, and the counterman is there, and the cook, he's the same guy, and then all of the passengers from the bus, which aren't very many people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's like 8 people or something, and then it comes into
Yeah.
a question because it's like, well, it's like if you have 8 people here and there's 8 people in here, like where did the other guy go? So then
Yeah.
it's sort of like the monsters are doing Maple Street, but a lot more comical. They're all kind of like looking at each other to figure out who's the alien in the group.
Yeah, and who remembers who from getting on the bus? 'Cause
Yeah.
You got a young couple who are very involved with each other, so
Right.
they're worthless. They're not going to notice anything.
Yeah.
The
And they got
bus
a middle-aged
driver,
couple.
yeah, and then the bus driver is kind of like, well, 7 got on my bus, and that's how many.
Right.
Well, do you remember all these people? The cops are trying to do their job, and they're, asking everybody, and the bus driver just, gets pissed off about it. He's like,
Yeah.
why are you asking me these questions?
Yeah. And you got like Jack Elam sitting at the diner counter hamming it up because
Yeah.
he's like the kooky old man, crazy
Yep.
guy, with
Yep.
with
He's
the
like, why
wandering
aren't
eye.
we going on? Why aren't we
Yeah.
getting back on the bus and going wherever it is they were, Albany or something?
Boston.
Was
Yeah,
it
the guy was
Boston?
saying, yeah, the guy,
Yeah,
the
I need
guy
to
at the
be in
table was
Boston.
saying, yeah, I need to be in Boston tomorrow. I was talking about Jack Elam, the guy with the lazy eye at the counter, and he's making
Yeah.
jokes the whole time.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And then the
he's like, take
cranky
me to your
guy. Well,
leader.
that's because
Yeah,
those two were,
yeah,
kind of going at it. It's like, why don't you
yeah,
have some more coffee? Why don't you just calm down?
yeah,
Well, obviously we can't go in the snow, so
right, yeah.
yeah. I loved that.
It was a great episode with a great twist at the end. But also high strangeness effects in it with like the jukebox remotely turning itself on and
Yep.
off and stuff like that. It's like
And the phone
poltergeist type
ringing,
things. Yeah, yeah.
the
Very
payphone
Keelian
ringing.
stuff. I feel
Yeah.
like it's very Keelian.
And there's a bridge that is in question in that
Oh,
too.
right. Yeah, that's the whole reason the bus is there is because the bridge was needed to be cleared with the snow, I guess, or they
Yeah.
just weren't needed to be repaired. They wanted it checked out before they proceeded.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's why they were waiting.
right,
And yeah, so of course I'm sitting there going, I know Mothman's not going to show up, but
right. Yeah, it's got some real Point Pleasant vibes to it.
yeah, it does. It really does. Yeah, it could have been one of those horrible ponds at the TNT area, that
Yeah,
have all the chemicals and crap in them.
right,
I could
right.
see it. You
Yeah,
could rewrite that whole story, in fact.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It would be kind of cool to write some like fan fiction of like the cops remembering that night or something, and writing about it afterward or thinking about it. That's
Yeah.
there's a lot of things you could probably do with some of these stories because I feel like the original series that was what they achieved there was never really achieved again, either
No.
by Sterling or anybody else. Like Night Gallery is kind of fun, but it's no Twilight Zone.
No, it's not.
And they brought the Twilight Zone back in the 80s and again in the 90s, and I think they did in the 2000s, and then Jordan Peele did more recently.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can enjoy some of that for what it is, but it's never,
It's
it
not
never
it's
even
not
got
the
close.
Twilight Zone.
Yeah,
It's different.
yeah,
Um, I feel like they should, I have no problem with different short format compilation stories, like it's a short story collection in a
yeah,
book done as a show, but just don't call it the Twilight Zone, call it something else,
yeah,
so we don't
yeah. Because
get it in our heads that it's gonna be the Twilight Zone.
yeah, I mean, there were other shows kind of like it. Nothing quite like the Twilight Zone, but you had The Outer Limits
Yeah.
was around, and that was really a different thing. Like those stories were very, um, well, I feel like they were more the kind of stuff you would read in like Amazing Stories or
Mhm.
Galaxy or any of those sci-fi things. More just like fun sci-fi stories, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and then Alfred Hitchcock Presents, you had the kind of suspense stories
Yeah.
and kind of true
Crime
crime.
stories. Yeah.
Sometimes there was a little bit of a supernatural element to it, but it was always very subtle, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I think the Zone also kind of owes its tradition to radio plays as well. There was a lot of
Mhm.
Sterling wrote for radio before TV, um, and some of those stories, like there's one about like the hitchhiker that had been done on the radio like a bunch of times before they made it a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, I don't think it works as a Twilight Zone episode. It's a cool story, but
It's no. I don't like that episode as much as others.
yeah, I would rather just watch Carnival of Souls because it's pretty much the same
Yeah. Yeah.
thing. But yeah, I mean, with the radio, you had like I think it was like Boris Karloff's Mystery Theater or something, and there was like Lights Out, and
Oh yeah, lights out.
you had the Orson Welles stuff prior to that, and yeah,
Yeah.
so those are a lot of fun too. You can find sometimes you can find those on YouTube for anyone listening. You can look up old episodes of those shows, and those were wild. They're really
Yeah.
really strange.
Yeah, my dad had some records of a lot of those, on
Yeah,
vinyl, and
I have a
and
couple
we
of those too.
we
Yeah.
would listen to those. Yeah, when he was a kid, he had to go to bed at like 9 o'clock, and some of those shows were on later, and he always wanted to listen to those. So he built a crystal radio, but then he got caught with it,
Uh,
and so then he made a little microphone from bits of crystal radio set stuff and attached it to like an earphone, like one of the little ear insert guys. The used to be the way you did without headphones, And
right.
he had a
Yeah.
wire that he put that went all the way downstairs, and he planted the microphone next to the radio in the living room and ran it, which is cool because it was right at the bottom of the stairs. So
Yeah.
he colored it dark so you couldn't see it, and
Yeah.
strung it up to his room so he could listen to the creepy stories. And it worked for probably, I think he said it was like 3 months before they caught it.
Wow.
And it's all because Graham was not a great like housekeeper, so she she didn't
Right.
dust very assiduously, so he didn't get caught.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's dedication to the creepy stories, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but those are a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I really do think Twilight Zone is one of a kind. I don't think there's anything quite like it.
no,
Never has been, never will be. And they are timeless, even though it is obviously like the early 1960s or late 50s, the way people are dressed and the cars and the technology and everything doesn't really matter. It exists in another realm. That's
yeah,
uh, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, the it's kind of a numinous realm where none of that stuff really applies because it's a place outside of time because
yeah,
these messages are always going to be important, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I was talking about it with my husband Zach, and when we first met, he really didn't like movies that were in black and white. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, why? Because I grew up with the Stooges and
Right.
Abbott and Costello and the Universal monsters and all of that. And I was like, why? He said, I don't know. It just doesn't hold my interest. I'm like, so, the first one I showed him was Harvey.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
And he
that's a good
got
one.
sucked right in to all the characters. And he was just like, oh, that was so good. And so, I got him to watch other films over the years, and other classic films, but we didn't really watch the Twilight Zone together. I don't know why. I think it was because we didn't have them on video. But now that
Right.
they're streaming, right? So I told him I was doing this episode, and I said, so I got to rewatch a ton of, the Twilight Zone. And as I'm watching it, I'm like, it doesn't matter what time period. This
Right.
does not, this is still applicable today. People can still understand it. I mean, yeah, there's a few things like telephone etiquette, I guess, and
Yeah.
everybody smoking cigarettes is a little weird, but that's true for all old films, because
Right.
they didn't stop that until like what, the 80s,
Yeah. Sometimes
Uh,
the language, the
yeah,
colloquialisms, and I want to bring
yeah,
some of those back because I feel like at least
yeah,
once an episode somebody says, "What is this? A gag?"
yeah. There's nothing in your mouth. What are you talking about?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so I was just watching. I was like, I'm gonna have to like when Fox gets back from college. I think we should all sit down and watch some of these.
Yeah. Like
Be,
curate a playlist of them or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sit around together as a family because I mean it's fun. They're short.
Yeah.
They're great for those of us who have seen too much stuff on social media and for the TikTok kids who have no attention span left or people who have,
Right.
ADHD and have no attention span left.
Yeah.
I'm looking at myself here.
Right.
Um it's great for that because the storytelling is just so well done.
Yeah.
Y-
Yeah, and it is compact, like we were saying before. Everything is played out for you very quickly, like in rapid
Yeah.
succession. And some
Yeah.
of them move a little slower than others, but like mostly you're going to get everything you need for your story, and you're not going to see the ending coming most of the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the you care about the characters. That's the other thing. The
yeah,
the actors all do a really good job of portraying, well, you're not going to like this guy, you know.
right.
Some
Yeah,
of the main characters you're just not going to like them from the very get-go. Poor
they'll
Telly
tell you who they are
Savalas.
right away. Yeah,
Yeah, poor Telly Savalas. You just look at him and you're like, "Oh, you're not Kojak, man. We're
right.
not going to like you."
There's
Nope.
nothing Kojak about him in that.
We're not gonna like you. I'm sorry, Tilly,
Yeah.
because I love him. He's one of my favorite actors from the 1970s shows.
Oh yeah.
He was great.
Yeah.
And then there are other ones you look at him and you go, oh, well, this guy's he's pretty cool, and right away, or that this woman is a good person, and well, and then there's that Maya the cat lady chasing the dude
Right.
in his dream, and so right away.
Yeah.
There's none of this. They're bland, stale characters. You care about them. The writing and directing and acting is so good you get pulled into it, even though it's very short.
Yeah. They're all exaggerated characters.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost caricatures sometimes. It's
Yeah.
but that's great because it draws you right in. You know exactly what you're looking at, or so you think.
Until the
Yeah.
twist.
So,
Um,
so
and
they're
and that's
experts
part
at
of
that.
that's
Yeah.
part of why it's like theater too.
Yeah.
Because of course stage acting is different than film acting, television acting.
And a lot of these guys came from the stage too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So
And like I was thinking about it, after I would watch, I don't know, about 8 episodes at a clip, then I'd uh go and look at something on YouTube or like a fairly recent television show clip, like House.
Right.
And the film style is so different and everything is different. And so it's a little bit jarring for a second there, oh, what's happening? Oh.
Yeah.
But even so, I chose House because Hugh Laurie's character is so out there in your face, him, right?
Right.
You can tell. So even in a 3-minute clip, you get that. So it's similar to the Twilight Zone that way, but it's still, the storytelling is completely different. The color, the way it's filmed, and it for a second it turns into a kind of culture shock. So I would suspect that people used to watching modern television shows diving into the Twilight Zone, it would be a little bit of culture shock in the opposite direction. But once you get sucked in, you're sucked in.
Yeah. I mean, if you start with any of the episodes we talked about tonight,
yeah, you'll be
I
fine.
suspect you will be. Yeah. So, and I mean, there's a million lists out there. I think that there are plenty of episodes that always get generally agreed upon as being the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
And To Serve Man is certainly one of those.
Oh,
I would say Living Doll is up there on that list.
Yeah.
Little Girl Lost is another one that I love.
That is so good.
Yeah.
And that reminded me of Stranger Things.
Yeah, actually, that is a lot like Stranger Things.
And to the point where I was like, did the dude who came up with Stranger Things kind of like see this as a kid and it gets stuck in his head, and then all this other stuff gets
The Simpsons did a
it.
parody of it on Treehouse of Horror as well, on one of their Halloween episodes, where Homer falls into a different dimension.
Yeah.
When he tries to hide in the closet. Yeah. But that one is great. I love it. I love that they just happen to know a theoretical physicist who can come over, and he's like, "Oh, I've seen this before."
Yeah, they call the dude at like midnight. Hey, physicist man who happens to be our friend, come over here. Explain this to us.
She might have fallen into the fourth dimension, or maybe the fifth.
Yeah.
I love that line.
I know. I cracked up. I loved it. But at the same time, I'm like, well, I do have a lot of weird friends, so I guess I could, know, I do know an astrophysicist that I could call.
Right. Either of us would have somebody on a short list.
Yeah. There's somebody that one of us would know.
Right.
Everybody's like, fine, we'll text you guys.
Yeah.
No explanation why that was there. I love the physicist. They were like, why? And he's like, I don't know.
It just happens sometimes. Yeah, we don't know. But yeah, that explanation is almost exactly the same as in Stranger Things, and actually, like the Marvel movies too, where there's some portal stuff going on in like the Thor movies.
Yeah,
it's a very similar like alternate dimension kind of thing. So
yeah,
well, we could talk about this show probably all night. We could probably do 4 or 5 episodes of the show. But I felt like we got a good survey of them anyway for a New Year's perusing.
Yeah.
The only place I've found them streaming is Paramount Plus right now, which
Paramount Plus, and you can get it on Amazon Prime, but Jeff Bezos, and I don't like him, so I do Paramount Plus.
Season. Right. Yeah, you'd have to pay for the whole season or something.
Yeah, unless you're a Prime member, in which case then you can watch it for free. But I don't like him. So
yeah. I've been trying to. I'm watching it on Paramount Plus, but that app just does not work on my TV. It sucks.
It actually works okay on ours, but our TV is weird. So yeah.
Or I guess probably the Sci-Fi Channel probably still does the marathon on New Year's Eve. So
it probably does.
If you have cable, just go look at that. But yeah. So what are you working on these days? You're still writing a book?
Yes, and the research itself is finished. Now we're putting it into a shape. Because what the research is right now is over 200 and some pages of type notes.
Oh boy.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
So
But
it's
we are
a
near.
Joshua Cutchin sized bibliography.
Uh, I think I scared him actually as much as the
Even
stuff
bigger.
that he's like, how many more of pages of these? What is happening?
Yeah.
There is so much data that has been accumulated that we were like, okay, it could be 3 books. So what
Yeah.
we've done is we've hammered out a way to make it 1 book to start with that is an overview with the most important ideas set forth. But then there's all of this
Well,
data.
just for context, the book is about light beings and light forms.
It's
You know, their
about
ascension. Yeah.
it's about anomalous light phenomena, generally not in humanoid shapes, because if we went with that, then I'd have another 250.
Right.
That was the first editing choice we made, was like, because if I was like, dude, there's so many beings made out of light
Right.
that and he's like, okay, so let's just take those out for now. So it's mostly spheroid shaped things,
Okay.
but it's kind of arbitrary at the same time. So we do
Right.
have other shapes. And the sources that we have are, there's historical stuff from, back in East Jesus, way long time ago. Stuff in, that the Romans wrote about. There's stuff from the Vatican. I'm not allowed to go to the Vatican. I wish I was. But there are some things that are quoted from people who went to the Vatican and did some research. There are databases that have been looked into, that are, there's so much data. It's kind of scary in a lot of ways. Um, so we've wintered it down and we're just putting it into a shape. We'll start writing probably in January.
Cool.
And then we'll race each other.
Yeah.
See who writes faster. I think he'll win.
Right. Yeah.
It's been a while.
I look forward to seeing what you come up with, because it is a fascinating subject. I've had my own personal experience with those things. So
yeah, I know. So many people have.
Right.
And I've had to stop collecting live reports from people, because I'm like, okay, Josh is sitting there going, just don't read another book. Stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really big, and we're gonna keep it to 1 volume to start with, and then later use the data for other projects. And meanwhile, I'm doing another editing job for Josh, so that's fun.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good partnership. It seems like you guys work well together. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely look forward to that, and the eventual return of your show. Do you think your show is going to come back? Yeah. Okay.
All right. I think so. Yeah. Right after the election, I was like, do I really? And then I was like, you know what? People need stuff to cheer them up. So
that's kind of, yeah. I mean, my podcast was brand new, and then that election, I recorded with Steve Berg the day of the election results.
Oh God.
It's like, and I'm like, you know what? People are gonna need distraction. I'm totally comfortable being an entertainer. I'm still gonna put like quality stuff. I'm gonna still put messages in what I'm saying, but sometimes people really do just want to hear some spooky stuff, or hear me goof off and talk about a movie or a TV show. So
yeah. And that's basically how I feel about it. And as to how it's going to just be me as the host. Morgana is a professional librarian now, so she really doesn't have time. So it's just going to be me. And as for content. It'll be whatever I feel like talking about, whoever I feel like talking with.
Yeah.
Lots
All
more
right.
stories from people. So it'll be fun.
Cool. Well, yeah, I look forward to that too. So, listeners, if you haven't checked out Barbara's show, 6 Degrees of John Keel, go look that up. And there's a good backlog of episodes there. You can,
Oh, yeah. There's
if
200,
you
I think.
haven't listened, yeah, if you haven't listened yet, there's plenty there to listen to before the show comes back. So go check it out for sure. And then the website, because you have some writings up on the website as
Yeah.
well, and
Yeah.
your artwork is up there as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
So
I did artwork for pretty much every episode. So,
yeah, yeah, and you got some essays up there and blog posts
yeah.
and things that are really cool. So I would recommend people check those out as well. But it has been great talking to you again. It's been
It,
quite a while. So
yeah, it has been. It has been. And thank you for asking me to talk about this. I've had so much fun for the past couple weeks, like watching, the Twilight Zone and,
yeah,
re-entering the zone and going, "Oh, this is so much better than I remember it. Dang, it's so good."
yeah, it really does. Like I said, it takes you off guard. There's episodes you've seen a million times and you're watching it, and then all of a sudden there's like a moment where you go, "Oh shit, this is good."
Yeah.
Like this is
Yeah.
just really good. You know.
Yep.
So yeah. Well, I really do appreciate you coming on, and this was fun to just geek out about Rod Serling and his wonderful universe.
Yep.
So yeah. All right. Well, happy New Year, Barbara, and to the listeners out there.
Yep.
Uh,
Happy New Year, guys.
yeah. All right. Well, I will. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.